listening to Packers Talk Network.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your guaranteed authentic tickets from theticketking.com, a longtime trusted source and local Green Bay business. Just go to packerstalk.com/tickets for more information and ticket links. That's packerstalk.com/tickets.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of the PackersTalk.com network. I am your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your host, Tim Hamilton. Co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packer fans that just love talking about the Pack. We're not your national sports media talking points. We're getting into real football. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason, of which we are now in. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials. Subscribe to the Packers Talk Network YouTube channel. All those things take seconds, make a huge difference to us. So thank you all to the listeners, subscribers, anybody tuning in this evening and beyond. Good evening, Tim. How are you, sir?
Good evening. Doing better now, 2 days out, but still really disappointed on the result of what happened Saturday night in San Francisco. So
it hurts. It does hurt.
Yeah, different kind of hurt than some of the recent playoff losses. But it still stinks. It was a game they should have won. And didn't necessarily think that would be the case going into it, but was certainly the case when they played it. They should have won that game. Plenty of missed opportunities in that game in all three phases throughout the team. So yeah, it's a tough one. I know, looking at it now, bigger picture, a couple of days out, and as we get into the offseason, the feelings on it will change because they do have such a bright future, and this was a better season than I could have ever imagined. I know when we were sitting here talking and they were 2-5, or when they were 3-6, or when they were 6-8, we didn't think they were getting to the playoffs. And not only did they get to the playoffs, they win a playoff game, and then they're on the road against the top seed in the NFC with a second half lead, and they were a better team in that game, should have won it. So, I mean, it beat all expectations for the season for sure. And there's a bright future to look ahead to, but just in the moment and in the here and now, it's disappointing because they should be getting ready to go play the Lions for the NFC Championship. So, it's kind of mixed feelings, but for right now, I'm still disappointed and, getting over the loss where they had a lot of chances to take control of that game and put it away and be getting ready to move on to the championship game. But yeah, I don't know. How you feeling now, a couple of days out from it?
Man, I'm sticking to how I went into it. We had we were house money. I said we graduated to FU money going into that game after the Cowboys game, and I stand on that. It's certainly, it was just so close, right? You could almost taste it, and that's what stings. But man, to see this team and how much they grew in one season with the amount of youth that they have, it's special, man. That was a special season. That playoff run, I mean, beating the Cowboys, that was a lot of special stuff about the season there. Even in the Niners game, you've got them on the ropes in San Francisco, man. That's where we were going with LaFleur before and getting it handed to us when we had the MVP and we had everything going for us. We're still traveling out to the West Coast and can't get it done. And now we got it done. You at least you're in it. You got them on the ropes. You look like you got it done. And, you can't come up with it. It's unfortunate. But, man, it's too much fun to think about where this team is at right now. And then think about, my goodness, I mean, you'd probably not be too mad about it if you just return this team. But you're going to add a whole draft of assets. You got free agent targets you might be able to go after now because you've got more capital than you had last season at least. So yeah, I'm very excited about the future of this team. Obviously there's a lot, and we're gonna get to it. We're gonna talk about the elephant in the room, Joe Barry. We're gonna get to some of these fun topics, but there's just a lot to be excited about. So while it does sting to me, and this is what I've kind of been consistent with on the folks on Twitter. This is not like the 2021 or the 2014. 2016, it was just sort of an anomaly in itself. We're just going to set that one aside. But 2014 and 2021 are the ones that a lot of people were comparing to. And to me, it's not like that because those were both closing windows. I think we all collectively felt that in 2014. Yet Charles Woodson going out, Peppers going out, Driver going out. Like there was that window of veteran leadership that was leaving. Obviously, Rodgers was going to be around. But there was a big turnover coming. Devontae Adams obviously entered the picture, and a new window opens. And then in 21, we all knew what was going on there. They were already doing salary cap gymnastics to keep the thing together. So at that point, it's like, okay, yeah, when it just slips through your hands, it's all perfectly set up at Lambeau, and then you just can't get it done. That was gut-wrenching. In my opinion, 2014 was gut-wrenching, man, because you just like, gosh, you were right there, and you're so close to getting, Peppers his Super Bowl, like stuff like that. You can't go back and fix it. Every last one of these dudes tasted that loss, and they all are back next year to come back and get revenge on that. So I think there's just a lot of, forgive me for those who hate these, but silver linings. And there's just a lot of reasons to be excited about the future of this team. And this is an opening window for sure.
It felt like it's the start of something, whereas I think the last 2 years with, going back to when the Niners beat them in 2021 in the divisional round, and then last year where they didn't make the playoffs because they were eliminated on the last night of the regular season, those losses felt like the end of something. This kind of feels like it's the beginning of something. And it was unexpected and beat expectations to make the playoffs, to win a game on the road in the playoffs, and then to almost win another game on the road against the top seed in the NFC, a game they should have won. So it does feel, with such a young offense and a brand new quarterback, that this is the start of something, whereas the last couple of years definitely felt like it was the end of something, and it just felt very heavy, and all the pressure was kind of on them, and it was like, if you don't win it, it's all going to end. Whereas now it's like, okay, you didn't win it, but it's just starting. It's just the beginning. And yeah, the expectations are going to change a lot. Like we're not going to have, like next year, we're not going to go in it and be like, hey, if they make the playoffs, whatever, it's a good, like now there's expectations and we'll see how they respond.
Next year, you make the playoffs next year.
Now there's expectations on this team, but this is the start of something. Whereas the last couple of years was the end of something. So I think that definitely kind of changes my feelings, at least, in that, okay, like we don't have to be down and glum about like the end of an era, because we just opened the window and it's wide open now. So let's jump through it, and
cheers to that, brother.
Yeah. And they have their third quarterback in a row. So, and he's just starting out.
Yeah.
So now your window's wide open.
It's wide open. And you could argue it's more open than it was before. With the way that they nailed these last two drafts. And let me make one last comparison. If we have to compare this to a playoff exit of, at least recent memory, this is the 2009 exit against the Cardinals. It's like, damn, if you win that game, man, you probably can go against anybody. It was gut-wrenching. You made it to overtime, shootout, just, toe-to-toe. Cardinals were just in the Super Bowl, right? Still had Kurt Warner. Gut-wrenching, but everything about that, you're like, this team will be back and nobody wants to play them next year. And I think that's the vibe I have right now. And I know there's a lot of people, the schedule's really hard. I'm like, guys, you don't get it.
Who cares?
Those teams don't want to play the Packers now. We're not the kind of, team that's rebuilding and limping into the season. We're the team now that they don't want to play. They're going to spend a lot of time on this team in the offseason. And that's, we'll get into all of that. We don't have to go too deep into it. But, I don't care about strength of schedule. That doesn't mean a whole lot because that changes
No.
throughout the season too.
No, doesn't mean
But
anything.
I would say, the Packers are a team that other teams don't want to play right now. I mean, and I think somebody else, I can't remember who it was, pointed out today that every player coming off that field after that game looked exhausted. Bosa at the end, he hit his knees and was just totally relieved that they actually won the game. It took everything that team had to beat this team, and they're the bully on the block. They have been, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, man, give these young dudes an off season now. Give them a full off season together. Add a few extra weapons into the mix. Got a ton of depth. And what this really reminds me of is the Tampa Bay team. Was it 2021? Were they 2021? When did they win?
When they lost them in the championship?
No, the Tampa Bay team, the first year that they won with Brady.
2020.
Was it 2020?
2020, right. Yeah, when they beat us up in Lambeau. Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah. I didn't think it was 21. 2020. That Tampa Bay team, the way it was built, they nailed 3 drafts in a row, and they were stacked with young talent, like at every position. They hit. I mean, if Goot just does half as well in this draft as he's done in the last 2, this team is going to be ridiculous next season. It's not going to be fair. And he's got draft capital. Again, we'll talk about this. We got this planned. We're going to talk about the draft a little in the second half of the show. But he's got draft capital not only just to use, but to maneuver with. You don't need, he got 11 picks? You don't need to add 11 players to this roster.
Probably not. I mean, we'll see how it goes, and as we get closer to it, like what they do with the guys that are on the roster right now, what free agents they bring back and whatnot. There's a long way to go, but yeah, I think it's going to be tough to find 11 spots for guys coming in as rookies on the roster. I mean, it's just they're deep now because they've been building and they've been keeping the draft picks because they've been hitting on the draft picks. So, yeah, building the depth, and it goes all into how bright the future is. And a lot of that is what they've done in the draft the last couple of years and being able to hit on that, and not only hit on that, but hit on that early in these guys' careers.
Yeah.
And it was a big risk with all the rookies and second-year players this year. And, of course, there are ups and downs, but you got a lot of answers on guys already. So you know what you have in a good way. And, you know what you're lacking, and you can really focus in and attack those positions because there's some positions on this team, especially receiver. Like, if there's a guy you really, really like and he happens to fall to you in the draft, I would never say don't take him. But it's going to be tough. Like if you're sitting there on the third day to take a receiver, like who you beating out? Whose roster spot is he taking?
That's my thought. You've already got competition in there at the bottom of that depth chart, and it's good competition.
And tight end's kind of the same way too. Like you have 2 guys at the top. So if you're getting a third tight end, it's to compete with Ben Sims and play special teams. Maybe it'll be a blocker. Like
there might be a conversation to be had there. I've got somebody in mind.
Okay, but I mean, the point is like they've built the depth now, and it's young depth and it's quality guys. So yeah, it makes everything a lot brighter. And to get back to your point, yeah, it's gonna be tough to find 11 roster spots for draft picks.
Yeah.
So it gives them the flexibility to move around and really target guys that they want in the draft, and maybe make some trades up. And who knows? Maybe
be
even
incentive to consolidate some of those picks.
Yeah, and maybe if there's some veterans that come available in trades, maybe that's another route they take. Who knows? But
we'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
lots of potential there.
There's potential there, but to get back to the 49er game, there's a lot of potential in that game too. And
what happened? Let's get into it, man.
Yeah.
What's your take on what happened in that game?
I keep coming back to all the missed opportunities, and you brought up this, 2014, the Seattle debacle, where they blew the chance to go to the Super Bowl.
We were booking,
and
tickets,
were probably
man. We were already booking tickets.
There were probably 15 different plays in that game where if they just made one, they win that game. So this game wasn't on that level, but there's probably 10 plays in this game or 10 situations in this game where if they go differently, the Packers win. Yeah. And it was spread throughout all 3 phases. Everybody's killing the kicker, and rightfully so. You have to make a 41-yard field goal. Playoffs, regular season, you have to make that kick. Yeah. So it was special teams, it was offense, it was defense. And to me, I go back to the start of the game, the first 3 drives, 3 red zone drives, you only get 6 points out of it.
Not good. Gosh,
Y
doesn't that
That's
that looks like wasn't there another game against the Seahawks where that happened and that's why McCarthy was so
it
aggressive in
was the
that
championship
2014
game.
game?
It was
Yeah.
the 2014 game where he
And they
kicked field
came
goals
away
down.
with field goals, yeah.
Yeah, and to come away with 6 points in those 3 drives was just it was setting you up to eventually come back and bite you, and it did. And then also the offense, you have to go back to how they played in the fourth quarter, and it was very familiar to some of the struggles early in the year in the Atlanta game, Vegas, Denver. The fourth quarter offense, they literally went interception, 3 and out, missed field goal, interception.
Yep.
You can't. I mean, they couldn't complete drives there. You couldn't put points on the board, and even the drive where they got in field goal range, missed a chip shot field goal that has to be made, but that was all Aaron Jones on the 53-yard run. The passing offense really didn't do anything in the fourth quarter. And Jordan Love made 2 terrible throws and a terrible decision, a terrible throw in the last play. But to me, that's what it boiled down to is they just left so many points and so many drives on the field starting in the first half, and it came back to bite them because they shouldn't – in the fourth quarter, they shouldn't have even needed those – I mean, you want to put the 49ers away, but if you would have taken care of business on those first 3 drives, it wouldn't have been so critical in the fourth quarter. And unfortunately it was. And I haven't even touched on the defense. I don't want to let them off either because they deserve blame. And I see a lot of people on Twitter saying, they played a pretty good game on defense. I don't think they really did. I think they were okay. I think they did some things well, sure. It wasn't a terrible game. We've certainly seen them play a lot worse, but they could have been better. I mean, when you needed a stop, they couldn't get the stop. And I think a lot of their success in the game was just Brock Purdy played awful. He missed a lot of passes. He missed a lot of open receivers.
He should have had 2 interceptions.
And he should have had 2 interceptions. They dropped 2 interceptions, and he missed open receivers. So I don't think it was a whole lot of like Joe Barry coming up with this great game plan or the defense playing great. The tackling was poor again. And when he needed a stop, they walked right down the field against the 2 high shell defense that he continues to play. He didn't try to force the situation. He didn't try to pressure Brock Purdy into a mistake that he was trying to make for 3 quarters. He was trying to give you the football.
Yeah.
3 quarters. He just sat back. Let's play 2 shell and let him dink and duck. And the 49ers said, okay. And they went right down the field and in the end zone. And it was kind of inevitable that they were going to score. I mean, they got the ball and I was like, just leave us enough time for the offense. So, the defense wasn't terrible, but they certainly didn't win the game for you. They didn't make the plays to put it away or to change momentum in that game. So it was all 3 phases of that game. And just overall, to me, it was so many missed opportunities on the Packers side and shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah. No, a lot of missed opportunities. I think LaFleur will see some errors on his part.
Yeah.
But, one thing that stood out to me is when Zach Tom went out, it seemed like things changed.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. He's been playing phenomenal, and it's not that Yash is, worse, but it's just different now. Now you're calling plays differently. Now you're, he's going to block differently, so Aaron Jones has to anticipate differently, or the pass, Jordan Love has to anticipate differently. There's just a lot that changes depending on the player, and that just seemed to change the game when he went out.
It was a costly, and Bosa kind of came alive a little bit against Yash. He didn't have the sack numbers, but he had pressures.
And I think that that's ultimately what led to the bad throw at the end by Jordan Love. Is I think he was feeling that, like that pressure was coming, man, and they know it's the end of the game just like he does, and he hadn't been in that moment yet, and now that he has been, that's great. It's a great experience. It's what you want, but that's a tough moment for a young squad, and that's where I'm like, that's where I lean back into 2009, where it's like, yeah, man, that's a tough loss, but goodness gracious, I can't wait to see what happens next season. These guys are ready, and they all now have that bad taste in their mouth, and that is a good thing to get when you're young, right? And it can't be a discouraging thing. But there's so much of this team that's coming back that I don't think it will be. I think it can be a discouraging thing when there's turnover. Hey, let's do things a little differently. That one didn't work. You're not going to have a lot of that. from a player perspective, from a coach perspective, we'll talk about that. But ultimately, when Zach Tom went out, I thought that changed everything. And then, I mean, for me, I have kind of the same feeling about the defense. Like, they didn't have a terrible game, but if you are going to be a contending team in that situation, your defensive coordinator needs to be an asset, not a liability. And in that case, Joe Barry's not an asset. He's where Dom Capers you can make. He was right in 2009, 2010 when he was in his prime. Man, he was dialing up some dirty stuff. He was dialing up some crazy play calls, and he was doing it. It seemed like at the perfect time. And you obviously had some excellent, legendary players, but you got good players on the field now. And you almost know that Joe Barry's not dialing up something. Like, if something's happening, it's because these players are making a play. He was dialing up some pressures those last few games. But, going into that last drive, that, head-to-head, let's duke it out one more time, and they've got Shanahan going against Barry. No, one's playing
it's a
chess,
huge mismatch.
One's playing checkers. Like, it's just not.
It's not even close.
The game, and we saw that, right? And so that's where I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, Barry's going to stay. Barry's going to stay." I'm like, nobody knows, right? But if you're evaluating the body of work, you can't say that. You can't say he's the best guy for the job.
You can't look at playing one good half of football against Dallas, playing an okay game against the 49ers, beating up on the Vikings with a third or fourth string quarterback, whatever you want to call them. You can't just look at a few games or a few halves of good games. You have to look at 3 years of performance. And I think maybe that's what LaFleur, at the end of last year, he looked at, well, they played good down the stretch. Maybe it's something that we can build on and carry over. And he made that mistake. And obviously it didn't build on and carry over anything. Right. You can't get fooled by a small sample size. You have to go back to 3 years. And 3 years shows you that it's not good enough. And nothing's improving on defense. Yeah, there's some players and maybe even some position groups like the interior defensive line that improve this season. But overall, as a unit, it's not improving. It's not getting better. And I go back to there's still communication errors. There's still guys that are lining up and the ball's getting snapped and they're looking at each other, pointing. You're 3 years into a defense and you don't know what's going on. You're 3 years in and Matt LaFleur has to spend more time with the defense late in the season. And you can look at Tommy DeVito lighting them up and Baker Mayfield and Bryce Young lighting them up and Kenny Pickett. Don't just be fooled by, okay football in the playoffs or good defense, whatever you want to call it. It's not enough. You have to look at 3 years. And if you want your team to take the next step, it can't this way. You have to have a defense that dictates to an offense that's more aggressive. And I'm not saying just, blitzes the house every play, but you have to be more aggressive and take it to them. You can't sit back there at the end when you need a stop and the game's hanging in the balance and you're just going to play soft and you're going to play your safeties back and you're just going to rush the same 4 guys. And it's so predictable and there's no aggression. You're not dictating anything in the game. You're letting the offense just take it to you time after time, game after game, year after year.
So you selling on Joe Barry?
I sold on him. I never bought Joe Barry, but I sold on him.
Never bought Joe Barry.
2 years ago. So yeah,
buy this thing. Somebody get this thing out of here.
It's not even a question for me. It just becomes trying to get into Matt LaFleur's head. I really don't know. I think they may move on, but I'm not going to be surprised at all if Joe Barry's back for another year. I think Matt really wants to work with him. And I think Matt sees him as trying and he's a good worker and, maybe he's a good, I don't know, I don't want to say he's a good communicator, but I just think Barry, he really wants to make it work with this guy. And he really thinks he's a good coach and he's trying his hardest to try to, find some positives in what the defense is and what it could be. So It won't surprise me at all if he's back, but for me personally, there's no way he could be back. And I just go back to the question, we've talked about it before, is like, in 3 years, what's changed? And like going
That's
into a
it.
fourth year with this guy, like what can you
Right.
point to and say, like, this is going to be different and this is going to be better next year?
Or this
You're
is going
just
to evolve, right?
right.
Or
You're
like
just
you're going to build
hoping.
on this.
You're
Right.
just throwing it out there and saying, yeah, I mean, we could be a better against the run, or we could be better in late game situation. Like, where's your proof that you're going to be better at it? You're
You're
hoping.
not building on anything.
No,
It's been and that's the thing is he's not 100% bad, but it has been 3 years of a very similar pattern. Maybe not the same pattern, but a very similar pattern, right? You start off kind of questionable, finish pretty strong. At the end of the year, you're not the liability, but
you're not helping.
you're not helping. Yeah, you're just kind of not the bad guy at the moment when somebody else is screwing up. And no, to me, what it comes down to, and this is what I responded with somebody else who was like just gonna die on the hill that Joe Barry's coming back. I was like, listen, Goot has a say in this too, right? And he's the one
Maybe.
adding asset. Well, he has a voice in it. I shouldn't say a say, but he has a
Yeah.
voice, right? He will be heard in some capacity, and he's been adding a lot of assets to this defense, and he's certainly going to have some opinion about how the assets have been developed. And I think if you're somebody who has watched this team pretty consistently over the years, call it the last 3 years, you got to ask yourself: is it really good talent that the GM is adding, or is it that this coaching staff is taking some guys and making them better? Um, and to me, I don't see anybody that you're just like, man, they really developed that guy. You know what I mean? If anything, there were a few that looked strong, like Kamal Martin looked strong and then just disappeared. Um, or like Oren Burks, who all of a sudden is playing really well for the 49ers. I'm like, man, he wasn't even good for the Packers. He was like below average. And then he goes somewhere else and he grades well, and he's not their best linebacker, but their best linebacker's the best in the league, arguably. So yeah, just to me, it's like, I don't know, man. I just don't see this coaching staff, defensive coaching staff, making guys better. I just see guys like Jair Alexander are exceptional players. Like, Rashawn Gary's an exceptional player. Preston Smith, like Kenny Clark. These guys are all exceptional players. You've seen it, outside of Joe Barry. Even Darnell Savage, right? Like he's had exceptional moments. But yeah, so that's where I'm like, I just don't see where it's like, when Joe Barry took over, this guy or this unit started doing really well. It just hadn't happened, and
No. And what's
so
going to
that's
change?
well, exactly. It's not like, all right, well, maybe he needs another year. No, man, we've seen 3 years,
3 years.
and if anything, you can argue that some guys have gotten worse and they shouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's the part where, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we got to like stop being so impulsive about this guy's washed up or we got to get rid of that guy. It's like y'all are about to toss out a all-pro corner in his prime if you aren't careful. Now, obviously, fans on Twitter aren't the GM, but if they were, boy, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah, and with Barry, it's like, what more do you have 3 years of a sample size to say, like,
Yeah.
that's a lot. And you've given him that. What's going to be better? And if you bring him back, we're going to be having the same conversation about Joe Barry next year. It's going to be the same thing. Like there's nothing you can point to and be like, yeah, this is going to be fixed and it's going to be better. And they can, like, what's going to be different? It's going to be the same defense, the same scheme.
Well,
you hope that some players play better, right? But even at times, like Kenny Clark, I think had a pretty good year. I think Carl Brooks flashed. I think there's flashes with Wyatt, but none of them all come together and play. Yeah. Like it's flashes, or it's games here and games there, or it's certain guys are playing well and other guys are struggling, or you have some guys that are playing well, but they still stink as a defense.
But
so
see, and that's what tells me that the players are good and the coaching is not.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And it's just, you get in these games against bad quarterbacks, and they eat you alive. Or you get in these games against decent offensive coordinators, and it's like they're just stealing your lunch from you, like because you're so predictable,
Yeah.
and nothing changes, and they know what's coming. Yeah,
Well,
it's he has to move on. I think it would be a really huge mistake. Like you're gonna set your team up, and you're gonna set Jordan Love up to almost kind of be like Rodgers was, where he has to constantly overcome a poor defense to drag you to playoff wins and to get you into the playoffs. Like you're tying your hands behind your back by bringing this guy back and expecting something different. It's insanity. It
well,
really
and
is.
and again, we talked about this earlier in the season when I was really going hard on Joe Barry and Stinovich, but he was pretty quick to admit his mistake with Mo Drayton, right? And he
Yeah.
obviously wasn't, even considering re-signing Pettin. He hasn't written Barry off, but he likes Barry. So like when you like somebody, you're not gonna do the public write-off thing. He's gonna do that as gently as possible, right? And so I don't think you're gonna get any kind of indication that he's gonna let Barry go until it happens.
Probably.
And Green Bay's historically been pretty good at that, but that's where LaFleur's a good coach, man. He's proving that he's a good coach. And he's got to ask himself if he's going to be a good head coach, which he is in most regards right now, is his defensive coordinator the best one for the job? And the answer is just obviously no for Joe Barry. You just can't, I don't see
Obvious
the
to
case
everybody
to
but
make.
LaFleur.
Well, and I don't know that it's not obvious to him
Right.
at this point.
So
Again, I
far.
think it's more of
So
like
far.
let's let this guy kind of ride it out, or if we're going to let him go, we're just going to, take it right up until we do it, and then we're going to do it, and we're going to move on real quick. Like, quick cut. I get to talk to him before any of the media finds out, and we're good.
Yeah.
And so
And
I think that's what it is.
And I think that's part of maybe why he did the press conference today on Monday as we're recording this, is because like he hadn't met with anybody yet. It was Monday morning. They had Sunday off. Like it was, hey, and he came right out at the start of the press conference, said, I'm not going to have answers for you on a lot of stuff because I haven't met with the coaches, the coordinators yet. We're just getting started with the players. Like, I think that was done purposely so he could try to avoid the Barry questions, even though he's still got a few. But he can kind of say, like, I haven't even met with these guys yet. So I can't, like, if he would have waited till Thursday to do a press conference, then it's like, you should have an answer by then. Like, what,
Yeah.
what do you wait? So I think we should know one way or the other by the end of the week, I would hope. I mean,
I think it'll happen quick.
yeah, one way or the other, because he's going to have to start interviewing guys. He's going to have to because there's obviously a lot of head coaches that have to fill their staffs. These new head coaches that'll be getting hired, teams that lose their defensive court. Like there's a lot of coaching carousel, moving parts going on. So he's going to have to hurry up and get to it if he's making a change. So I would think we're going to know by the end of the week. But yeah, I think that was part of why he did the press conference today, was try to avoid as many Joe Barry questions as he could and be non-specific as much as possible, which he was.
Yeah.
But he also didn't come out. And it's funny, some of the beat writers were pointing out, like last year when they asked him at the end of the season press conference, like, do you expect your coaches back? Yes, I expect them all back. I expect Joe. And today was, I haven't met with him yet. I haven't discussed
Let's see what happens.
So that was kind of like, okay, well, maybe that's telling you something without telling you something. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think there's some of that goes on, right? I think that and one thing that I've said and has really held up pretty well is listen to the things that players and coaches don't have to say. A lot of times the answer has been, sufficient, and they'll say something else, or they'll chime in and say, I'll say this. And it may sound simple, but if you pay attention, usually you can take something from it. So I think the way that LaFleur did his press conference today was very obviously different the way that it happened last year. And I think he knew last year, no questions, guys are under contract, we're going to keep going. Continuity was obviously his friend as well with all that was going to change. But, now, again, if you're going to be an honest head coach, and you have to make a case to your boss, whether it's going to be Joe Barry or somebody else, you have to make a case to your boss that you think this guy is the best guy for the job. And I don't see the case for Joe Barry being a better guy for the job than some of the guys that are now out there. So yeah, we'll see. You know, we got to see what happens. But I just, at this point, and most of the people are asking, did he save his job in the last few games? I just don't think that there's a front office or a head coach that is basing a decision on that amount of data. They are going to base their decision on a full body of work, which is 3 years, and player development has a lot to do with that. So that's why I say Goot has a voice in the conversation. But yeah, so I mean, this is going to be the hot topic until we get a little clarity on it, but it'll hopefully happen quick. But one assistant that we can really enjoy talking about and celebrating is Mr. Tom Clements. Can we just get raise a glass to this man? My goodness. Not one, not two, but 3 franchise quarterbacks that this man has coached and delivered for the Green Bay Packers. So much appreciation and love to Tom Clements and the work that he has done. Spectacular. Like we could really have a full episode, maybe we will, just for fun at some point this offseason, going through the body of work for Tom Clements. But, just a round of applause for him. And I hope he hangs on and stays the quarterback coach as long as he wants to, man.
I agree. And based on what LaFleur said at his press conference today, he does too, because he sung his praises and said how important he's been and how great he's been with developing Jordan Love. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to give credit to Aaron Rodgers because that was his guy. That's who he wanted as quarterbacks coach. And that, put it in LaFleur's ear. And LaFleur, yeah. So credit to him too. But, he stuck around. He didn't have to stick around after Rodgers. He could have retired. He's 70 years old, and he was already basically in retirement before the Packers brought him out of retirement. He could have left and said, Aaron's gone. That was my guy. I'm moving on. But he stuck and coached Jordan and has done a really phenomenal job with him. I mean, you got to credit LaFleur as well too with that, obviously, but. Clemens is the position coach, and we saw what he did for Rodgers. We even saw, going back to the later Favre years when Clemens was here under McCarthy. So, he's just done an excellent job with all 3 quarterbacks, and especially with Jordan, and the development that he needed behind the scenes, and what he's experienced with Tom the last 2 years, how Tom has really helped his game and improved it. And yeah, hopefully he stays as long as he wants to and continues to coach him up, because he does a really outstanding job with them. And, Jordan could use, somebody like that, a veteran coach who's been there. And that's his, it's not some young kid that's new to the position that's, hasn't been there. Tom played and he's coached it for a long time. So I think that's very beneficial to Love, and hopefully he stays on to keep him, to keep that mentorship going.
Well, and you can look at that and compare it to another situation that I was pretty critical of because I'm down here in Dallas. But, Packers fans are plenty familiar with Dak Prescott. Well, Dak Prescott's first quarterback coach was, I'm blanking on his name, Kellen Moore.
Yeah.
So Kellen Moore
was like 30 years old or something, right? He was really young.
It wasn't even that, I don't think. But Kellen Moore, when Dak Prescott got drafted, was a backup on the team. He was competing for a job, and he got hurt, and that's why Prescott got elevated to the job, and he ended up being the quarterback coach next year. Kellen Moore did. That's where I'm like, are you kidding me? A guy he beat out for the job is now supposed to develop him? Compared to, no. We're going to give Jordan Love a guy that has coached not 1, but 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks before him in this organization. Man, talk about opposite ends of the spectrum and getting just preparation, guidance, just that type of development.
Yeah.
and how it could play out, right? I mean, Dak's career is not bad, but man, it leaves a lot to be desired. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was trying to learn from somebody who he was just competing with, and now is trying to figure out how to be a quarterback's coach. So anyway, not to go too deep into that direction, but very, very appreciative of Tom Clements, and I think that was one of the first signs that Jordan Love might have something, right? It's like Tom Clements wasn't going to hang around to coach some slappy that
No.
had no hope. When he wanted to hang around and coach Jordan Love, it's like, oh, we might have a reason to appreciate this here, and here we are. So thank you very much, Tom Clements. I know you will probably never hear this, but in the off chance that you do, we are very grateful for your contributions to the Green Bay Packers quarterback room. Oh, man. And if we do, run out of things to talk about in this offseason, we can always turn back to appreciating Tom Clements. But in that, let's be impulsive by saying, can we be less impulsive here? I've got a little beef with Packers fans on Twitter right now who are just I'm listening to things. It's not just on Twitter either. I was listening to one of the local Wisconsin stations with Matt Schneidman, and he was taking callers, and there's this guy calls in, says his brother-in-law or something travels with the team in security. I don't know, it's whatever. But then this guy spouts off about, Jair is, he's being a diva. And then he spouts off about, Devondre Campbell's washed up. And, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, good Lord, man. Devondre Campbell is less than he's 2 years removed from an all-pro. Like, legit all-pro linebacker. Can we name the last time we had an all-pro inside linebacker before that? It wasn't A.J. Hawk.
No, it's been a while.
I don't even think it was Nick Barnett. You might have to go back to the Lombardi days to find your last all-pro inside linebacker. And this guy has 2 seasons of injuries, and now he's washed up. Like, guys. And, of course, we talked about it. There was a whole group of folks that wanted to get rid of Jair. And, they're still out there. He's a diva. He milked the injury. He didn't want to play. He's all about him. It's like he is a 26-year-old cornerback that, when healthy, is, man, I'm going to say top 3 cornerback in this league. It could be 1 any given day, right? I think it's like 1A, B, and C with him, Gardner, and probably Ramsey still. Who's in that?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's a few, but yeah, he's one of the top guys when he's healthy and going.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about milking an injury when he's played the last 2 weeks with an ankle injury, where he's not practicing on it, but he's showing up for the game and playing.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree. I think, and part of the impulsive thing too is everybody's killing the kicker, which he's got to make a 41-yard field goal. I'm not going to defend that. And
he's probably got so much going on in his head. He's a 21-year-old. He's a kid. He's a child.
He missed way too many kicks.
Sure.
I'll completely agree with that. But these people that are, wanting to kill him, and like, he is a rookie, and this was what they decided to do. You want a rookie kicker, you're going to live and die by a rookie kicker. And it kind of tied in with the rest of the team being so young. Give him some time. Like, just look at his brother.
Give him some competition.
Right, and I think they're going to.
He's not the best kicker they will. I mean, they did a lot with Mason Crosby throughout the years. They didn't just leave him standing alone.
And Mason had his bad years, and people wanted to get rid of him, and they stood by him, and he would always bounce back. And just look at Anders Carlson's brother, who was a Vikings, I believe, as a rookie. And he struggled early in the year, and they cut him because Mike Zimmer couldn't stand him missing kicks. The Raiders pick him up, and he's been one of the best kickers in the league since then. So, yeah, he struggled this year, but you got to give him some more time to grow. And, hey, they went into it with a rookie kicker, so if you want to throw some blame, maybe not throw it on him, throw it on Goody for not getting a veteran or getting some kind of competition. But give the kid a little more time, and let's not kill him.
Yeah, I think the people treating that like that's some kind of, crazy fatal flaw that's going to keep this team from winning a Super Bowl again. No, like we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the season. the players will always play to win. But everybody, especially this front office, went into this season thinking, I don't know what to think right now. We're going to see what happens. And when you're rolling the dice like that, yeah, rookie kicker, fine. It's like you've got a first-year quarterback. You're not sure what to expect from some of these receivers. There's just a lot going on. And, granted, I'm not sure anybody in the building was saying, well, we won't make the playoffs. But I just don't think that was the end-all, be-all. I think the objectives for this season were evaluation. Do you have a franchise quarterback or not? Put a big fat check on that one.
Right.
All right, well, do you have a kicker? Well, let's evaluate Carlson honestly and again, full body of work. It's not bad. Yeah, it wasn't great, but it's not terrible. And then you ask yourself, what is it? What's the upside that they're reaching for, right? And I think there were a few times that I saw him just absolutely annihilate the ball. Like 70 yards, a field goal could be good for. Right?
Yeah, he has the leg.
So he's got his legs. So it's like, what? He's a child. He's like 22 years old, I think. He is just a kid. And now you're putting him in front of millions of people saying, hey, go be the best in your profession at this thing. It's like, all right, you know what? He might make a few mistakes. That might happen.
They looked at it with an eye towards the future and long term. Like, this is going to be our young kicker. We want him to be our kicker for the next 10 years. And he very well might do that. He might be the next Mason Crosby, or maybe not that good, but he might be your next long-term kicker. That's what they were thinking. And we have a young team. We're going to have a young kicker too. Like, he's going to be part of this nucleus going forward, and that's what they were thinking. And hopefully he is. But yeah, he struggled this year, and he obviously missed a kick that he's got to make. You got to look at it long term, though, because that's what they were looking at when they took him in the draft.
Well, and again, it doesn't mean that they're just going to rest on that. It doesn't mean that they're just never going to bring in another kicker, and it doesn't mean that if he's not the best guy for the job, that they're not going to go with somebody else. I think they've said they're going to bring in competition. Let's see what happens. Is it somebody you draft? Is it somebody you bring as a free agent? My biggest thing about getting all hot and bothered about a kicker and wanting to fire him right away is, like, it's not easy to find a good kicker. So, first of all, if you want to cut your kicker, like, what's your plan? Is there, like, who are you bringing in? Who's the guy, right? Because if the guy exists out there, I'm sure another team wants him.
Right, and they had Mason Crosby for like 15 years. Look at all the other teams that'll go through like 3 kickers in one season. You don't want to get to that either. So I'm sure they're going to bring in competition. And I think if he struggles in training camp in the preseason and whoever the competition is better, they may cut him, because a kicker's, it's not like it's a position that's you want to continue to wait and give a guy more time. It's a replaceable position. You would love to find a guy like you can have like Mason long term, but it's a replaceable position. So give him competition, but also give him more time. And guess what? He missed the kick. The defense didn't get a stop, and the offense threw an interception. The quarterback threw an interception. So there was still a lot of ball game left after that missed kick. So
so it's kind of the other end of the spectrum of like, well, could Joe Barry save his job in these last few games? No, it's a full body of work. Well, can you fire the kicker because of one bad game? No, it's a full body of work, and he's on a rookie deal. There's just no reason to get rid of him. You bring in competition and see if he's the best, but to just kick him out because you bad timing, made mistake. No, like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so I'm just saying, Packer fans, let's be a little less impulsive. A lot of people wanting to get rid of a 26-year-old all-pro DB in his prime right now, and that's just doesn't make any sense, okay? Just because you don't like how he acts sometimes doesn't mean you get rid of one of the best players in the league. And I think that his character issues might have been resolved with some of the things that went on behind the scenes. He certainly seems to be in better spirits. But anyway, yeah, so let's just take it easy, Packers fans. Let's be less impulsive. Let's chill out a little bit. Let's appreciate the finer things in life, that we're already splitting hairs on what we need to make a Super Bowl here. And then let's not ignore the fact that we do have draft capital and a GM who's kicking ass and taking names right now to go ahead and beef up this roster even more. So that said, let's pivot ourselves on away from the 2023 season. We salute you, 2023. You were good to us. And the first thing to address, obviously, we got the scouting combine coming up. We'll talk about that. We'll get into all the draft prospects. We're gonna go through that and have some fun and nerd out on some draft stuff. But the thing that usually gets the most fanfare outside the draft in the offseason is free agency, which comes up here. It sneaks up on you, right? It starts at the beginning of March.
It's gonna be quick.
Pretty quick. So I don't know if you've had any chance to look into this, but who's at the top of your free agent list, man?
So I've had it, a chance, not a whole lot of time to dive into it yet. And there's going to be so many changes between now and the start of free agency with guys getting franchise tag, guys re-signing, other guys hitting the market because they're going to get cut for salary cap reasons or for, performance. New head coach comes in, wants his own guys, whatever it may be. So it's going to change so much between now and the start of free agency in March. Really early, but there's a few DBs out there, particularly at safety. And at the top of my list, there's no way the Packers can afford him. And I can't even imagine his current team lets him go, but it would be Antoine Winfield Jr. I would absolutely love him from the Bucs. I can't imagine they let him get out of Tampa. And even if they do, he's going to cost so much money. The Packers don't have the cap space for it anyway. But if that was my, you're telling me my dream wish list player, he would be probably right at the top of that list because he can do it all as a safety. And I think that would give you an immediate upgrade over obviously everything you already have right now. And he gives you like an all-pro back there on the – so now you're talking about an all-pro safety, an all-pro corner, a potential all-pro in Rashawn Gary, and then, a Pro Bowl nose or defensive tackle in Kenny Clark. So you would have it at all levels of your defense. But again, I don't think that's realistic for the Packers. There are some other safeties that'll be out there. And that's kind of the position that I would look at as safety and free agency, just because right now I don't see a guy that I want on the current roster as a starter for them next year at safety. So I think you got to get two guys. I think that's a position you can attack in free agency, because usually at safeties, you might get a couple guys at the top of the market that get paid a lot of money. Jesse Bates got a lot of money last year from the Falcons, but then you're going to get a lot of mid-level guys and a lot of kind of lower level free agents that you can plug in and start. So yeah, I would look there in free agency as a starting point. And if you can, corner, I think is a huge need as well, but I think I'd rather go draft with corners, unless there's just like a veteran that you can have a certain role for, almost like Rasul Douglas, but maybe not even on that level because it would cost you too much money realistically as a free agent. But somebody that you can just plug into he's going to be your third outside cornerback, occasional starter when you need him, or maybe he's going to be your nickel back. More, but if you're looking at like a number 2 starting every game safety, it's going to cost a lot of money, probably more money than they're going to be able to afford realistically with the cap situation. So I would rather go draft with my corners and attack free agency at safety.
I'd have to agree with you, man. And that's where I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about where would you actually spend money in free agency right now? Like, where is a position of immediate veteran presence that's needed, right? And you're talking about corner. I'd rather go there with, go to the draft for that. Well, you can, right? Because you got Jair, you got Valentine, you got Stokes coming back. I mean, you've got some guys that should be at the front of that depth chart before you would need the rookies to contribute at that point. So let them sit back there and be comfortable at DB number 4 or 5, whatever it is. But you need at least one safety. Maybe, again, it maybe depends on the defensive coordinator role as well.
That's the other thing. Like, what kind of scheme are you playing? What's going to be important to them? Because some guys are going to want really good safeties and other ones are going to say, no, we can get by with, mid-level guys, but I want really good, off the ball linebackers. So we need to, replace Campbell, and McDuffie's not a starter. So get me somebody else to play with, Quay Walker, like something like that. Right. So yeah, it depends on your scheme and who your coordinator may be.
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of thinking like safety makes the most sense to me as a position to look at in free agency. And one thing to keep an eye on, and this is something that I called out the last few years and it's kind of come to fruition, but what Goot tends to do is if he's going to invest in somebody in the draft, and it's obviously it's hard to predict, but he's been able to do this. He makes sure he's got a veteran at that position too, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that, right? Like he brings in the Smith brothers, but he also drafts Gary. You know, you
Amos
bring in
and Savage.
Adrian Amos, draft Savage, exactly. Yeah. You know, and so that's where I'm looking at this going, you know, this is one of those drafts where it's not very deep at safety, but you've got some decent veteran safeties that could be out there. Jeremy Chin may come available. You know, there's some guys that could come available. You sign one of those, draft another one. Now you've got your good veteran plus rookie kind of tandem that they seem to prefer. And then there's no telling. You could probably keep a Darnell Savage if you've got a D coordinator coming in that knows how to use him. I think that the biggest issue with Savage is how he's been used. You know?
Yeah, I think there's the potential maybe on a 1-year cheap deal. You bring him in if the coordinator says, I like his tools, I think I can use him a certain way, and you give it a shot.
Yeah.
That's the only way I would want him back. I wouldn't want him back with the same defensive coordinator, and I wouldn't want him on a long-term deal. It would be like a 1-year prove it deal. And if he's a good fit for the new scheme, then maybe you extend him from there. But yeah, I agree with you. I could see them going with a veteran and then drafting one within the first 3 rounds of the draft. And then maybe they even bring back a Rudy Ford or a Jonathan Owens to kind of be their third guy and their, start for the first half or the first quarter of the season until the younger guy's ready to step in and replace him.
Well, and they also tend to value safeties on special teams, right? So maybe you do hold over a Jonathan Owens to, like you're saying, start as a starter, be valuable on special teams. Once, the young guy is ready to step in front of him, he does, but Owens is still contributing on special teams. And that's where I think Savage too can be kind of a similar thing with that, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But safety is a position that it's got to be at the top of the list on both free agency and draft. For me, another position in free agency, somebody that I really would love to see play for the Packers next to Quay Walker is Devin White. And, he's one of those, will he get away from the Bucs? We don't know. But Devin White, man, he's fast. Him next to Quay Walker sounds like hell for an imposing offense. So I would love to see that as far as, who's at the top of your free agent list. That's not based on any kind of realities. These are just our wish lists here right now. But I think it'll be fun as we go through this offseason. We figure out kind of what's happening, who's being released, who's not. Yeah. We'll start getting closer to more realistic wish lists and who we think actually might be become a Packer. But there's a lot of guys out there. There's, decent free agents out there, and, this is going to be a fun draft. So, the other thing is, who's at the top of your draft wish list there, Tim?
So for me, I mean, you can see what they do in the first round historically, and you can already kind of pencil them in for it's going to either be a corner, an edge rusher, maybe an offensive tackle, but they haven't taken that in the first round under Goody, and they may feel really good about Rasheed Walker. I still could see them taking a tackle within the first 2 days of the draft, but so I think it's going to most likely be, if I had to guess right now, and they took a safety in the first round too in Savage, but if I had to guess, I think they're going to go corner in the first round. And I know that's, we're months away from the draft, so we'll see what happens. And that would probably be at the top of my wish list. Like I think they need more corners. Jaire's back. I like what Valentine showed, but I'm not ready to go in the next season and say, yeah, he's the starter. He's the number 2 guy. I think he's got to be in the mix. I think he's got to be in the competition for it, but I'm not comfortable enough if they decide he's a starter right now and he's the guy and we're not going to look to really push him with anyone else. And then Eric Stokes, anything you get from him is a bonus going forward just because of his injuries. Keyshawn Nixon's a free agent at nickel, and I wouldn't mind an upgrade at nickel. I would like to bring Nixon back as the kick returner and potentially at nickel too, or at least a depth guy. But if you can upgrade and get somebody better at nickel, I'm fine with that. So yeah, to me, corner would probably be the top need. I know they're going to need running backs, and Aaron Jones, absolutely, we haven't even mentioned him, absolutely 100% should be back on this team. Find a way to keep him, but you still got to look. You still got to look for the next Aaron Jones. You got to look for the next guy. So they do need to add running backs, but they're not going to do that in the first round. So I wouldn't put that at the top of needs. For me, it's cornerback right now, safety. I'm always up for another pass rusher or another defensive lineman to put with Kenny Clark. And then I want offensive linemen, whether that's competition for Sean Ryan, because he's probably the right guard next year. I don't think they're going to bring Runyon back, so you're going to probably need to give him competition. I don't think they're going to hand him the job just because they didn't hand it to him this year, even though he was splitting the reps with Runyon late in the year. You got to make a decision. Is Rasheed Walker your guy at left tackle? And the way he played over the second half of the year, I think he is. They're going to be their left tackle going forward. I think they found something there. But I still would love to add an offensive lineman to that mix, preferably when they can play tackle, because you just need the depth. You don't get through a season healthy there. So at least offensively, that's probably even more so than running back. I'm looking to continue to build up the offensive line because you need that for your quarterback. And you always need depth there. You always need guys.
Yeah, no doubt, man. You can't predict these injuries. They happen all the time on the offensive line, and we've seen it. We saw it this year. Going into the season, we thought we had an embarrassment of riches at the tackle position, and it took like a week, and it was all of a sudden a really thin position, and we were very fortunate that Walker and Tom held it down and stayed healthy. But, that changes real quick. So that is one of those that I feel like you just have to constantly be kind of dumping back into the chest. But fortunately, they've been good later in the draft at doing that.
Yeah, they're really good at finding guys in the middle rounds. Yeah.
So you don't have to have that pressure on the first round to say, man, we need this guy. And so this is where I would say, Packers fans, if you're trying to figure out what the Packers will do rather than what you want them to do, because that is such a disappointing endeavor. we do it every year. We fall in love with a player or a handful of players, and you have to just ask yourself, is this somebody the Packers would ever draft? And a lot of times it's like, nah, probably not.
Right. Well, and the other thing this year, and we'll be talking about it a lot now going forward, is they got 5 picks in the top 100. So they can really attack things.
We can have some fun with that. And, we're getting late on this pod, so we won't go too deep into the what-ifs and all the speculation. We got time for that. We're going to get into that. But we can have some fun with that because, again, I made the comment, I think Goot will be motivated to consolidate picks. And the thing that's interesting, and this is where I was going with, if you guys want to figure out what they're going to do, what Goot has done in the past and been very good at is picking from the deeper positions in the draft. That may sound simple, that may sound kind of obvious, but it's something that not all teams are actually good at. And so when you ask yourself, well, how do they keep finding these, receivers in the second round of the draft? Well, they're drafting receivers in the second round in these deep receiver classes where these guys that are in the second round in another class would be in the first round. So a lot of fans don't think of it that way. You get a very narrow view of, well, these guys are in this rank in this class, and we don't really kind of look across classes at all. So what's important to think about is he really does target deep classes. And something that's interesting is the receiver class is deep.
Yeah.
It's deep.
Again.
So that's one that they're going to be tempted to pluck from at pretty much any point in the draft, especially the first 4 rounds. Does it make sense? Who knows, right? But they've proven that they'll do the best player available thing, right? Sign the Smith brothers, draft Gary. That they'll do that. So hopefully they won't draft a receiver 5 in the first round. That would be strange.
No,
I think they would maneuver around that. I think that's where you see, like, if you're I think we're at 25.
Yeah.
You don't. I think that's where you're looking at who do you want to fall to you. If you see a handful of receivers there, you know they will fall to you. You know there's some teams back there, like, we just don't need a receiver right now. You either go up and get your guy who might be a tackle, might be a DB, or you get back, you get more capital, and you don't put yourself in a position where your best player available is a receiver in the first round. You know.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I just want to point out how kind of funny it is that how many years in a row was everyone screaming, take a receiver in the first round? We don't have any receivers. And now this is going to be the year where everybody's saying, don't take a receiver. We don't need any.
No.
Don't take any of them
it's
at all.
it's
It's
that
like we
gif
went
of
from
Andre the Giant, right? He's like, no.
yeah, yeah. We went from you have to take one in the first round. What are you doing? To now like don't take one at all. Don't take them in all 7 rounds. Just ignore them. It's crazy how quickly that changed.
They won't, and this is where it gets conflicting as fans. Like in a draft like this, where it's as deep as it is, they're gonna draft a receiver. I think they're gonna have to. It may not happen until the 4th round, 5th round, and you might have like a really legitimate, receiver 5 who boots Bo Melton and Malik Heath out of the way. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you really are sitting here going, please don't do that. And I don't think they want to do that, right? I don't think they just sit there and go, well, whatever, we'll just take it. There was I think a lot of people talk about the Jordan Love pick and all that kind of stuff. Was that best player available and, all that. There was some chatter after that Jordan Love, even with them, I think they were at 26, was the last player on their board that had a first-round grade, and it wasn't close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that situation, you're looking at this going, we either get a first-round player or we have to get back and we don't get any first-round players. And I think in that case, trading back would have been almost as unpopular as drafting Jordan Love.
Well, I don't know about that. That was pretty unpopular when it happened. But yeah, I mean, I think even Goody might have came out and confirmed that like he was the last one they had the first-round grade on. And going back to your point, like they may very well take a receiver. They could, and it's going to look kind of weird because they have all these guys now at receiver. But if you're sitting there and you really like him and he's the best guy on your board and you take him, like as a fan, like I can look at a depth chart and be like, wow, they're loaded at receiver, but they really like this guy and he's their top guy. Like, what am I going to say? No, don't take the top guy on your board. Take somebody else who you don't think is as good as this guy. Like, don't as a fan, don't you want them to take the guy they think is the best football player? So take the best football player.
We've seen it play out. We've seen it play out where you're like, oh man, you don't need that guy, and you take him anyway, and all of a sudden, turns out you did need that guy.
Yeah. You play 17 games, you need everybody.
Yeah, you do. You need everybody, and yeah. So I would think, if we're talking top of your draft wish list right now, for me, it's got to be Dejean out of Iowa. I don't know how you say his last name.
The corner,
yeah. And to me, and it's not even an Iowa thing. It's just the descriptions that I've heard of him. I hear Micah Hyde, right? I hear he's kind of this versatile playmaker. Could play safety, could play corner. Just a ball hawk, just all around good DB. That I immediately think Micah Hyde. So that's what, to me, is most attractive. And Micah Hyde wasn't an athletic specimen. I mean, he's obviously athletic.
This dude supposedly is. They're saying he's
right,
great.
exactly.
And he returns punts, too. Micah Hyde returned punts.
Right. But Micah Hyde, he didn't have the fastest 40 or the highest vertical or, he wasn't the biggest guy. He just was a playmaker and has been. And he's one of those that we wish we hadn't let go. So that's why I look at this guy, Dejean. We'll figure out what his name pronunciation is. And I think, man, like that's a guy you want in this secondary right now because you can just put him where he's needed. Do you need him at safety? Do you need him at that like kind of nickel star position? And give a creative, a talented defensive coordinator a weapon, right? A weapon that you don't have the pressure to have in a specific position. You know what I mean? So that would be at the top of my wish list is Dejean, and I don't know that he gets to the 25th spot, but I do think that this is one of those situations, and Goot talked about this before again in I think it was the 2020 draft, where they saw Jefferson and receivers falling, and then they tried to trade up for him, and then they couldn't. I think this might be a situation where it's like, if DeJean gets to 15, you've got the draft capital. I bet Goot tries to make a trade up for a guy that he knows is his guy rather than sitting back and saying, man, I sure hope that our guy falls to us, across these next 10 picks. But we'll see. We got a lot of time to speculate about draft stuff and what we're going to do. And so what we're going to get into this offseason, like I said, we're getting late on the pod here. But what we're going to get into this offseason right now, it's going to be all about the draft. We're going to go ahead and start scouting out and looking at the different positions, figuring out who are the good fits. Who do we think will be a Goot guy, right? The RAS scores are a good one to look at. There's certain guys that just Goot just will not draft. So we're gonna get into all that. We're gonna break it down. We're gonna each week just get into a few different draft positions and talk about who fits, who doesn't, and just take it a week at a time. And by the end of this, if you've listened to every episode, you will be a draft guru. That's not a promise.
You'll be ready to run your own draft and set your own board
Exactly.
and make all the tough decisions.
You'll be smarter than some NFL GMs. Because let's not forget, there is an NFL GM out there that spent a first-round pick on Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, and Mitch Trubisky.
So that's as we go from being an in-season podcast where we were talking about the game breakdowns, what happened, what's going to happen, what's coming up, all that kind of stuff. We're shifting into the offseason now. We're going to focus real heavy on the draft. We got the combine coming up. We got plenty of prospects out there to look at. Tim, I think we should each make our own big board and kind of compare them and see how that goes. But yeah, we're going to have some fun figuring out who the next Green Bay Packers are going to be. We'll cover the free agency period that'll come faster than we think. See who might land in Green Bay. I think there could be one. I don't think they're going to have a lot of splashes, but I think they could add one, real quality starter. We'll see. But Tim, on our way out on this pod, is there any parting words you'd like to give to the 2023 season?
Just enjoy it for what it is. It beat expectations, and it showed that the window's now wide open, and we have a quarterback for however many years this is, 30-some years now. We have the third straight franchise quarterback.
Man.
Just be hopeful about the future. I know it was a rough ending against the 49ers, and it sucks that they're not getting ready to beat the Lions in the championship game, but enjoy it, and there's a bright future. There's a really, really bright future, and we have a head coach that's one of the best in the game, and we have a quarterback that's one of the best in the game. That's what you need to win. So the window is now wide open. I think there's going to be a lot more playoff games coming in their future.
No doubt, man. No, I'm so pumped about the future of this team. You said it. You got a quarterback. You got a head coach. You also have a GM that might be at the top of the game right now, the way he's drafted the last two off seasons, and we'll see what he does this season. But there's a lot of really exciting things to just be excited about, right? A lot of reasons for optimism right now, Packers fans. So we won't get too much into our feels on this one. Very, very grateful for the 2023 season of the Green Bay Packers. It was a lot of fun. Certainly an ugly end, and that's too bad, but what a beautiful season, and the window is wide open. So thank you, Packers, for just treating us fans so well. Gosh, we could be Bears fans, They are in the top 5 of the draft more than they're in the playoffs. So there's that. What would you rather have? Would you rather have that, or would you rather be in contention for the playoffs for 10 years?
And with another franchise quarterback, the third straight, and they haven't had one of those since forever. So
Jordan Love is literally the best quarterback in Bears franchise history right now.
Yeah, and he's better than any of them.
Oh, man, that's a good note to sign off on. So thank you, Packers fans. Thank you all for tuning in. Certainly tune in again next week. We are not stopping. We are your Packers weekly pod. We are going to live up to that. We are here throughout the offseason. We're going to talk draft. We're going to talk free agency. We're going to talk OTAs, we're going to get real hyped about a lot of videos of dudes in shorts, but it's because it's all we've got until we get back to training camp and we get to do this thing all over again. But as Tim said, enjoy it. We've got a window wide open right now, and there's a lot of fan bases that are super jealous of that. So don't let the loss sting too much. Sting a little bit, let it go, because the future is very bright. So thank you all for joining us this week on the Packers Weekly Pod, part of the PackersTalk.com network. Check us out on YouTube, X or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias. Give us the like, spike that like button, spike that follow button, do all that stuff. It takes a split second, and it means a lot to us. It goes a long way to supporting all these different people who are talking about your beloved Green Bay Packers. So we hope we'll see y'all next week. And, of course, go, Pack, go.